Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us here live on this Saturday afternoon. This is AEC Day Today Reports on a Saturday. As you all know, we shared with you that because the Delaware Valley is doing an evangelistic series during the month of August, we won't be having our shows, but we wanted to still come to you in some way. And so we chose Saturday afternoon. And this month, we want to spotlight our youth. And that's what we're doing today. And whenever we spotlight our youth, we want to invite our youth director, Pastor Graham, to join us because this is what he does all year long, puts a spotlight on our young people. So what do you think about our Saturdays for the rest of August, Pastor Graham?
I think it's great. I think it's a great opportunity for them to be able to express themselves. Normally, when they express themselves, they do it just to us or they just talk, inside. But now we have an opportunity for everyone to be able to hear what they're thinking, what they have to say, and I just want to caution you: this is their minds. This is what they want to talk about, and so we just got some fiery folks getting ready to go through, and I like them. I think that everyone will enjoy it.
Absolutely. We have a great panel. We're ready to
Sure.
get to them and what they want to talk about. We will come back at the end and share some of the exciting things that we have going on with our youth for the rest of the month that we want you all to be a part of. But for now, we want to give them their time. So just give us 1 minute, second as we transition to our panel. We ask that you welcome them with open arms. We know that you're going to be blessed by this dialogue. And of course, if you have questions, that's what the chat is for. You can put it on Facebook or YouTube, wherever you are, and we'll make sure the panel gets your questions. So we're going to bring them up in just a second.
Thank you, Latasha and Pastor Graham, for that introduction. Hi, everybody. I want to welcome and thank you for tuning in. My name is Araba, and I will be your host for today's conversation. I am joined here by six lovely young Black men and women. And I want to thank you guys first and foremost for deciding to be a part of this somewhat controversial topic, right? But before we get started and talk about these interesting things, I want to introduce you guys to our audience. So, just so you guys get accustomed to the flow of things, when I call on your name, I just want you to tell us where you go to church and also tell us where you go to school and what you're studying. I will start with Jamae.
All right. Hello, my name is Jamae Ferguson. I go to Open University and I'm studying social work and I attend the Sharon Temple Church.
Thank you. Next, we have Toby.
Hi everyone, my name is Toby. I go to Ephesus Seventh-day Adventist Church. I go to the College of William and Mary, and I currently study health sciences and Africana studies.
Africana Studies. Whoop, whoop. All right.
Yeah.
Next, we have Giovanni.
How you doing? My name is Giovanni. I'm ready to enlist in the army, and I go to Ephesus Seventh Day Adventist Church.
All right. Thank you, Giovanni. Next, we have Lauren.
Hi everyone, I'm Lauren. I'm from Englewood, New Jersey. I'm in high school. Currently, I'm majoring in health science, and I go to Community SD Church in Englewood, New Jersey.
Gotcha. Next, we have Impilo.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mpilo Norris. I attend the Liberty Seventh-day Adventist Church in Baltimore, Maryland, but I attend school at Yale University in New Haven, Connecticut, studying biomedical engineering.
Great. We also have another panelist. He's having some audio and technical difficulties, but his name is Jake. When he comes back, we'll see if we can try and get him to introduce himself. But let's just dive right into discussion, guys. So recently, we've been seeing a lot of movement as far as the fight for social justice. And we've been seeing a lot of resistance towards the murderings of Black bodies and state-sanctioned violence, right? And so, whether you're protesting in New York City, Wyoming, West Africa, or even Europe, there's three words that you can for certain be sure that you'll hear, and that is Black Lives Matter. Now, recently, they've been getting a little bit of criticisms. We'll talk about that. But Black Lives Matter became popular when three young Black women started the organization after the killing of Trayvon Martin, right? And so, before we kind of dive into the discussion around Black Lives Matter and why it's receiving criticism from the Christian community, I just want to know on a general sense, right? What are your thoughts on the Black Lives Matter movement? And I will start with Giovanni.
My thoughts on the Black Lives Matter community is that it's really helpful. Like it shows a lot of the struggles that the world might not see that we go through, and it's a platform to enlighten others upon what we face and how we're oppressed.
Absolutely true. I will go to Impilo.
Yeah, just echoing what Giovanni is saying, I do believe that it is an extremely important movement because it is bringing attention to a lot of issues that we've been dealing with for years in terms of the destruction of the Black body. And frankly, I believe a lot of the criticism that we're seeing as it relates to Black Lives Matter is really just people taking one element here, one straw man here, and trying to take one negative element that they see and use it to represent the entire organization. But the essence of the movement is the fact that Black Lives Matter, and we need to bring attention to that, and we need to create policies that can help affect good change. And for that reason, I think Black Lives Matter is an awesome organization.
And Pila, I want to thank you for your response specifically because I think you touched on a very important issue within this frame of discussion. However, I don't want to go into it right now, so we will bring that up a little bit later. But thank you for that response because I do think it's important. Toby, what is your opinion on the Black Lives Matter movement?
Yeah, so my opinion on the Black Lives Matter movement, I think it's a movement of like Black people, a movement of the people where like Black people can band together and really like organize and respond to like white supremacy that's going on all around the world. And I think it's just a really efficient way for Black people to say what's happening to us. The killing of our bodies is not what is appropriate, and it shouldn't happen. And I think it's a really good response in order to organize and be like, it's not okay. And we're going to respond in an appropriate manner. And, just really like have our voices heard and our voices seen and stuff like that. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Lauren, what are your opinions on the Black Lives Matter movement?
I agree with what our other panelists says, like they've said 100%, but I also want to touch on the fact that it's bringing people together. So I like the community it's created, how people from all over the world can share different ideas and move and work towards a bigger change that we all want.
Great. Next we have Janae before we go to Jake.
Like Lauren said, I definitely agree with what my fellow panelists have stated. Two words that also come to mind when I think of the Black Lives Matter movement is effective and consistent. Since it was created, it's been effective. It's done exactly what it has been created to do, to advocate for Black bodies, to work against police brutality. And it's been consistent, meaning it's been present at every point that it's needed to be. And it's been sustained foundationally throughout from 2013 up until this point. Those are the two words, I think.
Now, Jake, I know you just joined on due to technical difficulties. Can you hear us now?
Yeah, I can hear everyone.
Great. So before we get your response on your opinion on the Black Lives Matter movement, just tell us where you go to church, where you go to school, and what you study.
All right, hello everyone. My name is Jake. I go to the community church in Englewood, New Jersey. Right now I'm in college. I study biomedical sciences at Royal Holloway, University of London in England. Yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Great. So what are your opinions on the Black Lives Matter movement?
Yeah, so I fully support the Black Lives Matter movement because they're advocating for something that's very important for just Black people in general. Police kill Black innocent people for no reason, and it's good that us Black people can come together and fight and advocate for those people who suffered from discrimination and stuff like that.
So I think a lot of us can agree that the Black Lives Matter movement has served as a voice for the voiceless, right? However, recently there's been some criticism surrounding the founders of the Black Lives Matter movement. Recently, one of the co-founders, her name is Patrice Cullors, she made a statement that the Black Lives Matter movement is not only a social justice movement, but it's in a sense a spiritual awakening. She mentioned that when we're at rallies and we're saying the names, hashtag say their names of fallen Black men and women, we are in some ways invoking their spirits and paying respects to the dead, right? So at first, when I heard this, I thought, what's the problem? I think it's important that we remember who the people who have been killed, and there's nothing wrong with showing respect to those who have died at the hands of police brutality, right? Um, but I think that's not the only critique out there, and I think it's important for us to kind of assess other critiques, right? So she mentioned that the Black Lives Matter movement is a spiritual awakening and a spiritual movement. My question to you guys would be, do you think that as a Christian, we should be aligning ourselves with the Black Lives Matter movement? And I'm going to throw this to anyone on the panel.
So yeah, I think that our as a church, I think we all agree that racism is a sin, and discrimination is also a sin. And our church, being Seventh Day Adventist, we believe fully in the Bible. And there's texts in the Bible that say you should not You should not discriminate against people based on their skin color and stuff like that. So when I think that our church should and is doing, I think, agreeing with the Black Lives Matter movement and helping out.
So I have a question to ask off of that. Does anyone have anything particular to speak to as far as the criticisms that the Black Lives Matter movement is receiving? I know, in Pilo, you mentioned quickly during our introductions that you weren't really understanding the criticisms of the Black Lives Matter movement. Do you mind expanding on that a little bit?
Yeah, so I think one of the issues we have in our country, specifically the United States, is we're very polarized and we're very partisan, right? It's right versus left, Republican versus Democrat. And I think every single issue we have, there's an advantage that's taken to turn every organization into a right versus left issue. And when it comes to the Black Lives Matter movement, I believe there was an interview done where some of the members, the founding members, claimed to be Marxists, right? Essentially subscribing to the communist style of political organizing. And obviously, that doesn't sit well with many people on the right side of the political aisle in this country. And so that was used as a way to discredit the entire organization as a ideological tool of their political opponent. And they also highlighted one of their bullet points in terms of what they believe in, where they mentioned that they didn't necessarily subscribe to the nuclear family, but they subscribed to a more holistic community style of village based families as opposed to a nuclear family. And so basically, they use that to say this organization is butting heads against Western culture. This is butting against what we believe as the United States. But when you look at the totality of what they're talking about, they're really suggesting that as Black people, as a country, we need to come together as communities. We need to come together and think of ourselves not as individual people that stick to ourselves, but as communities that work together and uplift everybody. And then you look at all the different bullet points in the totality, you get that message very clearly. So that's why I said at the beginning that they're taking one element and trying to distort it to discredit the whole organization. And I simply don't buy that when you look at the totality of everything that they're promoting.
Gotcha. Impilo, you made a very profound statement. I do want to expand a little bit on that more, but does anyone have something to say to what he just said before I go on? Does anyone have any opinions on the criticisms that the Black Lives Matter movement has recently gotten? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Jamae, I saw your hand, and then we'll go to Toby.
Yes, I just think that we're missing, at least as a church, when I'm thinking about the criticisms that the church has been putting forth, I think at the foundation, we're missing the foundation of what the Black Lives Matter movement is about. People aren't being treated as people. They're being treated as if they're less than. They're being disenfranchised. They're being murdered for no reason. And that's why the Black Lives Matter movement exists, to advocate for those people. Those people also happen to look exactly like us. And so that movement was organized by people who look like us. So we're trying to basically save ourselves. So I'm trying to figure out what where our issue lies as a church when we're trying to, I mean, we participate in church movements. We, as Black people, are a part of the church. So why is it that the church takes such issue in supporting its people? You understand what I'm saying?
I think you raised a couple of great questions, and we're going to explore that later as well, especially how some of our Black people in our churches are feeling due to the response that the church has taken on the Black Lives Matter movement. Some people are feeling as though their needs are not being met by the church. And so we'll definitely dive into that a little bit later. But Toby, you also had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak to like one of like the main criticisms with the Black Lives Matter movement. So I know like everyone knows about like it's kind of like All Lives Matter is basically like a way to kind of like gaslight like the Black Lives Matter movement as a whole, saying that Black Lives Matter is basically racist because it's saying that there should be division. Like, you know, it's basically saying that Black Lives Matter is basically trying to divide people when that's not really the case. And I think like the All Lives Matter movement is kind of trying to be like all lives matter, which of course like Black people are like, yeah, of course Black like all lives matter, right? But then the Black Lives Matter movement is trying to say that Black Lives Matter too as well. So I think like I agree with like, you know, that all lives do matter, but then like the All Lives Matter movement, like what exactly are they doing, you know, per se? There's not really any like action being made, but the Black Lives Matter movement. So like we can see like there's multiple like positive things that the Black Lives Matter movement and the organizers have been doing. So I think that's just like a main tension there between like Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter and like movements that try to like criticize it.
Absolutely. Now, I wanted to read this comment from a church pastor of a certain church. I will not disclose his name or church because I do not want to get sued. But what he says is, we are opposed to racism and sexism, but we cannot support these movements because their agendas embrace other policies such as LGBTQ rights, abortion rights, and an expansive welfare state, and so on. So, based on the statement, it seems as if certain people feel as though the church should separate itself from social political movements, right? I guess my question to you guys, and I want to know your thoughts on the statement as well, but my question to you guys is, do our fundamental beliefs as Christian oftentimes, is it possible that it causes us to disconnect with the people that we're trying to serve? And I will throw this to anyone on the panel. I see some people thinking. Jamae, you look like you have something to say.
I'm trying to process my thoughts as I'm responding. Like I just recently took from one of my summer courses, Fundamentals of Faith Beliefs. And so we kind of went in depth about what our beliefs are. And basically, like one running theme was that the fact that we even have these beliefs makes the Adventist Church one of the few churches that says exactly what we stand for and doesn't waver. And so I think as Adventists, we find it difficult to be open-minded about movements like this because they embrace so many different kinds of people and different kinds of things that are just out, quote unquote, outside of the structure and rigidity of our beliefs. So for example, one of our beliefs, I don't want to like misquote it, but basically it talks about like family and marriage and the family and what God's original ideal for man and stuff like that. And so like you said, if we were to support the Black Lives Matter movement, many people believe we would be supporting as well. Like Mpilo mentioned, the non-nuclear families and stuff like that. So I think that's where a lot of the contention or the uneasiness comes when people are like, I don't want to be outside of like what we know to be true because people find difficulty in that, and I understand it. But I think it can also be dangerous because we walk a tightrope of being completely against people who need help because that's our mission is to show love at the end of the day and to be, that's what a Christian is. That's what Jesus did when he was here. He fought for those who needed to be loved. So I think that's where we kind of have to find that balance.
Latasha, it's interesting you say that. I think people from YouTube also agree. The comment from YouTube says, the church can support Black lives even if they don't like what the organization is supporting. So I agree with a lot of the sentiments you made. And Pilo, I know you raised your hand, but I kind of want to get Lauren's opinion on this as well. You've been a little bit quiet, so I want to know, what are your thoughts on the comment that was made from this pastor and to the question I asked? And if you need me to repeat the question, just let me know.
I absolutely agree that the church can support Black lives without supporting the movement, because the movement is more of just, bringing people together to kind of embrace Black culture, as well as like trying to like accept everyone else. So like embracing that Black Lives Matter, everyone matters, like it's less of like alienating Black people, but more of like kind of normalizing the acceptance we need. And I think it's important, like Christians in general, we're seen as like loving people, we're seen as accepting people. So if we just embrace that, we do align with the right side of the Black Lives Matter movement, with the main part of the movement, which is just accepting everyone as equals. So I think when we embrace that in church, and we embrace that wherever we go, like even in things we say and things we do, people can kind of feel that love radiating off of us. So I think just, we don't have to necessarily say, oh, I'm with the Black Lives Matter hashtag Black Lives Matter movement, but just, expressing that you feel everyone should be accepted and seen as equal.
Right. And Pilo, I'm going to go to you before I move on to the next question.
Yeah. I think one of the issues we have is we believe that working with someone necessarily means endorsing that someone. No two people are going to agree on all the same things, right? So even if I work with you and endorse with you, that doesn't mean my thoughts are 100% aligned with your thoughts. That's never going to be the case. And I think that works in the case of Black Lives Matter. One example that I think of that we see in the Bible is Paul, when he is in the midst of a lot of different philosophers, I believe it was in Ephesus, and they have many different shrines to different gods. And there was one shrine that was to the quote, the unknown God. Now, the Bible doesn't tell us if the unknown God necessarily was Jehovah or some other God that they considered the unknown God. But Paul was able to use that as an opportunity to engage with them and talk with them and introduce God to them. So here he didn't necessarily subscribe to all this polytheism that they were expressing, but he was able to work with them and engage in their religious discussion to introduce God to them. And I believe that's something that we can do as well, where Christ meets people where they are and uses that as an opportunity to engage with them and teach them more accurately, as the Bible says. So I think Adventists very much can engage with Black Lives Matter as it relates to the LGBTQ question. We can agree on the fact that everyone has an opportunity to express their humanity unabridged, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to engage on every single point. And I don't think we should be afraid of that. I think if we are too harsh and put a stone wall, it gives the wrong image, which is we're against everything, and that's not exactly the case.
And Pilo, wise words from a young man. Hats off to you, and I think we all can agree that you really just preach a sermon right there. So I kind of want to pivot the conversation a little bit, and Giovanni, I'm going to go to you, and then I'm going to go to Jake afterwards. So we're all Black on this panel, right? Stating the obvious. Some of us are from the DMV area. We're from New York. We're from Philly. Heavily Black concentrated areas, right? And I think in our own churches, we also have heavily Black concentrated churches as well. Um, and so, but I also think that when we go outside of our closed spaces, that's not necessarily the case, right? We do know that there's a large population of white people, and I'm not sure if everyone on this panel is Seventh-day Adventist, but there is also that large population of non-Black people. Especially the higher up you go in the church body, you realize like the higher ups don't necessarily look like we do, right? And also the church body has received criticisms after the killings of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, for not speaking out and for not making statements. Many of them have, but it was after the fact that they received backlash, and some felt as though they did not speak quick enough. So I kind of want to get a little bit personal here, and I want to ask you guys this question, and please feel free to answer honestly. This is a safe space. Do you feel as if and God forbid, we don't want to speak this into existence, but do you feel as if someone was to happen to you, do you feel particularly supported by the church body? I'm gonna go to Giovanni first, and then I'm gonna go to Jake.
So if something were to happen to me, I feel as if the local churches that I've come in contact with, like along the East Coast, they would feel something. They would feel like a little bit of pain or something towards like my passing. But like as for the higher ups, like they haven't met me on a personal level, so they wouldn't know anything of me for real. They would just hear my name and just be like, "Oh, he's a part of the 7 day church." So one of our members had passed, but they wouldn't really, as a whole, really understand or like feel anything for me.
Okay, that's honest. Jake, I want to go to you, and I want to get your opinion.
Yeah, so I think that same as him. I think my local church, like the people I've grown up with, like I've grown up in that church. I think they would feel for me, that have sympathy for me. They support me, just like as my pastor, he was talking about George Floyd in one of his sermons. I think that my church would support me for the global conference. I actually don't know, to be honest. Like I see that they don't say anything. Sometimes they don't say anything, and I don't know like whether they would say anything for me.
Okay, Toby, I'm kind of interested in hearing what you have to say.
Yeah, I personally feel like my church would support me. I feel like we've had conversations in our AOI time that is dedicated to talking about Black Lives Matter, showing that they do care about the issue and they care about what we think. So I personally feel like if something were to happen to me, then they would band together. They would protest, do all that. So, yeah.
Okay, great. That's great. I want to go to Jimmy, and then I'll go to Lauren.
I say that I'm part of two churches. So Sharon Temple is one that my father pastors at, and then Oakwood University Church, because that's my school's church. So I think both churches would, if something were to happen to me, would protest like Toby said, and be all over social media, like making a noise about it. But in terms of the global church, I'm highly doubtful. Only because, like I said before, we're very afraid to seem like we're going against any kind of grain. So I feel like I think that, like I said, local Black churches, even maybe past like the churches that I attend, would because I have family around the world, type thing, that obviously I think that would be like people would respond in that regard. But I like I said before, I'm highly doubtful that the world church would be like, this young woman has lost her, we must do something. Like I really don't think we would see
that. Lauren?
I totally agree with what everyone has said in respect that the local churches probably would get up and protest and say something, because at that point you really do feel the loss. So I think with this movement, a lot of like the backlash you can get is because people aren't sympathetic. So when you actually feel the loss, you have someone personal to you who you've lost because of the discrimination, racism, and things like that. You have to do something. You want to do something. You want to get justice for them. So that's why I feel like on a local level, you will get a lot of the support that you need. Like your family will get the support, your church will like advocate for you. But on a global level, around the world, churches like on a higher up level, I don't think you would get as much support as you would expect, just for the fact that it's not really personal. But we do want to work towards that, having sympathy no matter what. But I think it's just the sympathy part that kind of plays into it.
Okay. I want to get Mpilo's opinion before I read one of the YouTube comments.
Yeah. I think a good way to synthesize what we've all been talking about is there needs to be a sense of family and community within our churches. I think we can all attest that maybe our local churches would be willing to take the heat for us in these situations. And I think it goes more beyond the fact that the color of our skin match. It's also because we've grown up in these churches. We've created families in these churches. I know for me, most of the people that I consider aunts and uncles are from my local church. And so I think the question is, how can we expand that family, that sense of family, not just within the local churches, but in the areas, the conferences, and into the world church at large? Now, obviously, there's a lot of issues there, cultural differences, physical distance. So it's something that we need to pray about and come up with new ways in which we can do that. But I think that's the real key there. How can we expand that sense of family beyond our local churches to a much larger area?
So you mentioned how do we expand that feeling and sense of family to the church at large, and I think this also speaks to the comment that we just got from YouTube, and it says, um, "The SDA church is not run by people that look like us. Maybe that's why the official church policy does not support Black Lives Matter." M. Williams, the same as back in the 60s, we were told by the GC not to get involved in the civil rights movement. Pierre Elf, the leaders of the SDA church are fully in the spirit when they. Pierre Elf says, the leaders of the SDA church are fully in the spirit when they would move past the fact that they don't have the same skin tone. They see what Jesus sees in us. Wow. I actually did not know it was advised by GC to not get involved in the civil rights movement. So that's pretty interesting. A little unfortunate because I think it kind of speaks to some people not seeing beyond their own circles and understanding that there's a bigger cause at hand. So
I'm sorry, may you read that last part again about the spirit?
sure. So Pierre Elf says the leaders of the SDA church are fully in the spirit. If I'm reading right, yeah, the leaders of the SDA church are fully in the spirit, then they would move past the fact that though they don't have the same skin tone, they see what Jesus sees in us. Did you have a thought on that, Impilo?
I really just needed clarity,
Okay.
so I can think about it a little bit more.
Okay. All right. So I kind of want to pivot the conversation a little bit to popular culture and media, right? And so I wanted to talk about the film Black is King. If many of you are not aware, Black is King is a visual album actually, that was created, directed, and produced by Beyonce. I think of it as a movie because the production was just that great. But she released this visual album, I believe it was last week or so, and the album was supposed to showcase African beauty, African art, African culture. And she did an interview recently on the news, and she talked about why she named the film Black is King. And in Beyonce's definition, Black is King refers to the fact that Black is regal, it stands for power, it stands for strength, it stands for beauty, all of the things that Black people have been able to maintain while being oppressed for thousands of years. However, not everyone has had the same views or has saw the vision that Beyonce had when filming this, right? So she's received quite a bit of backlash and criticisms from the Christian community, many of whom actually did not watch the film but took offense to the title in itself. So my question to you guys would be, have you seen the film Black is King? What are your thoughts on it, and how do you feel about the criticisms that the film got? Even if you just saw clips of the film, I know a lot of them were circulating on social media. I kind of just want to get your thoughts on it. And do you feel as though the film deserved the criticism that it got? Lauren, I'll go straight to you.
I'll say that I haven't watched the whole movie. Visual album. I haven't watched the whole thing. I've seen clips of it on social media, Instagram, Snapchat. But most of the backlash I've seen is focused around kind of the messages that we're seeing in the film. I saw like horn signs, things like that. That's where I saw more of the backlash. But the title in itself, I can see where people would kind of disagree with that. But most of the things I've seen on social media have to do with like the symbols in Black is King, and I've seen the symbols.
Okay, thank you for your honest opinion. Giovanni, how about you? Have you seen any clips or anything surrounding Black is King?
I have not gotten around to watch it yet, but the backlash to it, I feel like if people haven't seen it, they shouldn't really try to criticize it yet. Like, you can't criticize a body of work without watching it or being able to experience it.
Okay. Jake, how about you?
Yeah, I agree with Lauren. I think that from the images, I haven't seen the movie, but from the images that I've seen, I've seen like the horns and stuff, and all the like the Illuminati symbols and stuff in there, like on YouTube. Not YouTube, Twitter, that people have pointed out, and I don't really know Beyonce, but I know from her music that she, it's known that she, that she was in the Illuminati. So yeah.
Jamae, I know you're an artist, right? And so I would think that you, out of all people, could appreciate a body of work like this because Beyonce paid specific homage to African artists. She used a lot of imagery and traditional African symbols as well. What were your thoughts? Did you see the movie? Did you see any clips? Have you heard any commentary surrounding the film?
I haven't seen it yet, but I have seen clips. And like you said, I have a deeper appreciation for the artistry. Beyonce's mind is, I mean, people can say whatever they want, but she is a very creative individual, and I respect her vision. So that, um, a lot of the critiques though, like when I was reading a couple articles, because I hadn't really gotten into it for real or like read or watched anything about it. But when I was reading about the critiques, a lot of people were like, well, Black is not king, Jesus is king, and stuff like that. And like this, people saying the film is demonic and stuff like that. And so when I was reading one article, basically, on in terms of the critiques from like Christians in general, not just the Seventh Day Adventist Church, about this film being demonic, I think people are more so demonizing African culture than anything else. And I mean, that has to do with white supremacy. So, colonialization, all that stuff. Black culture, African culture has been demonized for decades, eons, hundreds of years. So the fact that Beyonce went out and did this and was like, this is what African culture is. And obviously, people can say, like, people who actually come from Africa, had their own critiques as well. But she showed the beauty of what Blackness is, what African culture is. And white people can't handle that. You know what I mean? And so, and especially white Christians, they're like, nah, we're not trying to see that. We're not trying to, you know what I mean? So they're obviously it's going to be demonized. And putting the coding of religion over it just makes it a little bit more palatable to what is the word I'm looking for? To make it seem like that what they're actually doing isn't what they're doing. You know what I mean? Or what they're saying.
Yes, Jamae, great segue into my next question, actually, because I think about when even the Black Panther movie was released, and I think about Black is King. I think about the Black Lives Matter movement, and I see that immediately there was, after all of these things have been released, there was an uh, immediate response or backlash from the Christian community, right? And so you've touched on it, not a little bit, but a lot of it, about where this stems from, and it's possibly white supremacy. And so my question to you guys, because I do want to talk a little bit more about it, do you think the backlash that like the Black Panther movie Black is King and the Black Lives Matter movement has received, is that anti-Blackness? And then Pilo, I kind of want to get your thoughts on this because I think you've definitely alluded to these things a little bit throughout our conversation. So I'll go to you first.
Okay, so to answer your specific question, as far as are criticisms of these films necessarily anti-Black, it depends on who's making the criticism and what the nature of the criticism is. For example, when it comes to the Wakanda movie, or Black Panther, I have heard some criticisms from Africans specifically, that it could be considered what I like one word that someone put it called the Wakandification of Africa. In other words, to sort of conglomerate all the myriads of different African cultures into one and to have this fantastical interpretation of what Africa is. I have heard that. So, I mean, that's a whole separate discussion. But in terms of what I think we're getting to now, I have to agree with Jimmy on this and maybe build up a little bit that we do have an issue where culture and religion are too often intertwined. right? I think of the Orthodox tradition. I know we're not Orthodox Christians, so obviously we're not going to align on every doctrinal issue. But if you look at the Orthodox tradition, which isn't the Catholic tradition, it's a different Christian denomination altogether. Every country is allowed to express orthodoxy based on the cultural norms of that country. So if you go to Ethiopia, the orthodoxy is very much aligned with Ethiopian culture. If you go to Russia, if you go to Ukraine, if you go to Greece, right, the culture expressions of the religion are based on the culture of the people at that time. Another issue that I think we're dealing with is language barrier. I was listening to a professor by the name of Jane Small, who was looking at the term voodoo, for example, and we know that tends to be a taboo when we talk about African spirituality. But I learned that the term actually is only specific to a few different languages in West Africa. And it really just refers to the essence of God, right? And so it refers to the relationship that the people had with God in the different elements of life. You know, being able to identify God in nature, being able to identify God with each other. And we have evidence of God sanctifying essentially this expression of relationship in Romans chapter 1, where God says, I gave my word to the people of Israel. But frankly, everyone in the world has had an opportunity to come to know God through things such as nature, through things such as the relationship with each other. So we do recognize that God can manifest himself in different cultures. But unfortunately, because we've gotten so bottled up into one cultural expression of Christianity, of our relationship with God, it can often distort who God is and how people can relate with him.
I want to thank you for ending on that, Impilo. And I kind of want to hear from Toby. I'm going to ask you a question and tailor it a little bit, Toby. But based on some of the things that we've heard from Impilo and Janae about this kind of clash between cultural expression and religion, I want to ask you this question, right? Do you often feel the need to choose between your blackness and your Christianity? I know that's a deep question, but I think based on the points that have been brought up, I think it's an important question to ask.
So the question is like, do I feel like, is there like a tension between like my blackness and Christianity?
So I think we know there's a tension between the two,
Right.
right? I guess my question would be to you: does this tension often make you feel as though you have to choose between one or the other, your blackness or your Christianity?
Sometimes I do. Cause like for me, like I remember, cause I'm part of this Bible study group at my school, and I remember like we're doing this thing where like this series called Healing like Racial Trauma, and every single time I referred to myself as like a Black Christian, and like sometimes like I remember like reading or like seeing somewhere that before you're Black, you're Christian first, right? And before I used to like, well, I still think about this still. I'm like, I'm Black, but I'm also Christian. But does the order like really matter? So like sometimes I really have to think about it. Like, am I putting like my Blackness before my Christianity? But I don't really necessarily think that's the case. But I feel like that's still something that I'm still trying to explore and learn more about. But I'm interested in what everyone else thinks about that, because I feel like that's something I'm still personally struggling with.
Okay.
So I'd like to hear other people's take on that.
Does anyone want to answer that before we read a comment from YouTube? Anyone at all? Okay. Oh, Impilo, you can go.
Yeah, I personally do agree with the statement that you are Christian before you are Black, right? The Bible says that when we get to heaven, we don't know what we're going to be looking like, but we just know we're going to be like God, right? So ultimately, it's not even about what I look like right now. I'm going to be a completely different person when I get to heaven. That's the main goal. But then the Bible also says that we are fearfully and wonderfully made, right? And God has essentially made us in his image. So to hate ourselves and to speak negatively about who God has made us is to deny the fact that God has made us fearfully and wonderfully made, and to deny the fact that God's image is expressed in ourselves, right? And so, in other words, while we're focused on being Christian, we can't completely express our Christianity without a love for self. God says, love others as you love yourself. So the two go hand in hand, but I guess the issue comes in maybe we shouldn't get so caught up in the politics of blackness that we lose sight on our objective, which is Christianity and becoming like Christ.
Okay. That's definitely a fair answer. I'm gonna read this question from YouTube before I go to our last question, and then after our last question, I want to address some of the questions we've been getting from our YouTube comments. So Robert Harris asks, "Is it possible for there to be an intentional honor of Black art and culture while there's still potential non-Christian messages?" I really do want to hear Jemai's opinion on this question, but before I go to her, I kind of want to get Jake's thought about this because Jake, you mentioned like the whole like Illuminati thing with Beyonce, and sometimes we see these weird messages in music videos. So, do you want to take a spin at answering that question?
Yeah, okay. So, Black art, you can appreciate people's art and stuff like that, but when it comes to you seeing images that are against your Christianity, your religion, you can say, "Oh, that's not okay," So this isn't like, for example, for the Black is King, like, um, you can agree with what she's saying, "Oh, Black people are powerful, etc." But when you see stuff in those videos, like, for example, the horns or whatever, you can disagree and stuff like that. So it doesn't really, to me, um, I think that you can appreciate Black people's art while still maintaining and believing in what you staying strong in what you believe in.
Okay, thank you. Before we address the YouTube comments, we'll end on Jemai.
I agree with what Jake said. I think it's like an individual thing in a way, because whatever you have decided you are going to stand for and value in terms of your Christian walk, and your relationship with God, that will determine how you view anything. And Black art is included, I think. And so I think the question, I'm still trying to figure out like how I'm trying to understand it. But while there is still potential non-Christian messages, I think yes, there's always potential for non-Christian messages to be in anything because sin permeates the world. But like I said, it's more dependent on how the individual has decided they're going to filter that through what they value, how their relationship with God, stuff like that. So I think it's kind of difficult because you want to have a foundation and you want to be like, I'm not going to waver on this, but at the same time, you want to give yourself space to appreciate things. So I think again, it comes down to the individual and what they decide.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you for that. So we do have a few minutes left to our panelists. I want to thank you guys so far for sticking in there, giving such great, insightful responses to some of these questions. I know it hasn't been easy, but so far you've managed the conversation very well. So we do have a question from YouTube comments, and it's a little bit personal, but feel free to be honest. Have any of you ever experienced racism? How have you handled it? And how should Christians respond when they're personally discriminated against? I kind of want to start with Lauren on this question.
Okay, so have I experienced racism? I've experienced like prejudice, but I don't know if I should speak on it. I was younger. So I was in elementary school, and I remember I was playing with my dolls, and I had a friend, and not all of my friends were Black, and I had one of my friends, I remember. And I remember I was playing with my dolls one day at recess, and she came up to me. She was like, "Can I play with you?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." So she took my dolls. She just took my dolls, right? And I was like, "Why would you take my dolls? I want to play with you." And she was like, "My mom told me I'm not allowed to play with people who are Black." And I was like, I didn't know how to deal with it, right? So I was young, and I went back to my mom. And I was like, "Mom, why was she telling me this?" She was like, my mom gave me advice. So she was like, "Don't do anything wrong. Don't do anything you regret. Don't fight her. Don't say mean things to her, but rather just be nice to her, because then she really won't have a reason to like be mean to you." And she did bring it up with the school. We did like go over things in school like regarding that issue, but since then I kind of knew to like when I experience situations like that, you don't necessarily want to like be violent. You don't want to say things you don't mean. You don't want to kind of be the bad person even though they started it, right? So I think um your question about how Christians should like deal with racism or prejudice and things like that, I think just, you know, being the loving person, because God says to love your enemies, right? So you should just, I don't know, love your enemies, pray for them, you know, don't be the person that you kind of wouldn't want. I mean, like treat others the way you want to be treated. So I think in that respect, we could, I mean, we use the Bible for things like that. Obviously, you might have like a little, like, you might like itch a little hearing things like that. And like you want to like backlash, you know, kind of like fight and things like that. But I think just be mature about it, be respectful, don't
Okay.
do anything crazy, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Giovanni, as a young Black man in America, have you experienced racism? And what is your opinion? How do you think Christians should respond to racist encounters?
So an experience that I've had, I had to go to this agriculture um conference basically, and it was in DC. So me and my group, we were kind of late for the classes because you know how they say if you're 5 minutes early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late, and if you're late, oh well. So we're young, so we didn't really understand that yet. So we ended up getting to all the classes late, but we would know that like the set time for like everything else would be straight. So we ended up making it to lunch on time because it was just like a regular thing. Like they would be like, it's 5 minutes between each session, and then you go to lunch. So we ended up going to lunch, and there's an elderly white man in front of us, and he says they're always late for class, but they always are on time for lunch. And me and my group, we would like we heard it and we were just like shocked, but none of us wanted to act out of turn because like it's a conference and we don't want to like make a scene because we're a group of young Black, which called men and women. We just didn't want to like cause a giant scene in the place, so we just let it roll off our back and we just let it be. So I think that's how Christians, as Black Christians, we should handle things of that
Okay.
nature.
Thank you. So we do have 8 minutes left, and I kind of want to end on something that I think is important for today's time. But my question is to you: why? I mean, sorry, not why, but what are you doing personally to stay sane during these times of civil unrest? And what is your recommendation to young people just like you? You know, we're witnessing a social revolution that's going on, and while it's necessary, it cannot be easy to not only have to deal with a global pandemic, but having to see your Black brothers and sisters be killed by the state and oftentimes see their murderers go without any consequences. So, what is your suggestion as to how we as young people can stay sane during these times of civil unrest? Because we have so little time left, please do try and keep your answers to a minute or less, and I'll start with Lauren.
Just keeping my answer short, I think it's just it goes into like educating yourself, whether it's reading the Bible, researching, and encouraging others to do the same, because a lot of these issues come from like ignorance. So I'd say just encourage others to educate themselves.
Absolutely. Okay. Jermaine?
I'd say being honest about how you feel, like actually acknowledging it instead of not shoving it down, because then it just surfaces negatively, and writing things down.
Toby?
Yeah, so I was just thinking about it. So I feel like sometimes like us as youth, like we need to turn off social media because a lot of times I feel like we can internalize like all these like like racist things and then start to like actually believe like the stereotypes about like the stereotypes that racists are saying about us. So I feel like if we take the time to turn it off and like really like educate ourselves and really like understand our God-given abilities and talents and utilize them in order to build up Black people and Black youth in the community so we can show that we are not what you're saying we are, and it's really showing like the glory and the beauty of God that way.
Jake?
Yeah, so we are living through a lot of social, injustice and whatever. I think it's important to remember and to act on what we say. So Black Lives Matter. Let's go out there and go vote, and or go donate to such and such cause or the George Floyd cause or whatever, just to make sure that we're just not just only saying this stuff, and we're actually doing and acting on what we believe in.
Absolutely. Giovanni?
I feel like a good way to like move through this troubling time is to, always pray on the situation and to surround yourself with strong other strong Black youth in your area.
And lastly, Impilo.
Yeah, there's a quote that I like. Some of you might know it. It says, Lord, give me the wisdom to change the things that I have the ability to change, right? But give me the strength to deal with the things that I have no control over. In other words, don't allow yourself to get so caught up and so stressed out about things that you can't do anything about. Allow yourself to distract yourself with things that you like, hobbies, other activities, schoolwork, right? Because life goes on. But at the same time, find avenues, as so many other panelists have suggested, to get involved. If you want to post something, bring attention to so many different issues, go ahead and post it. If there's a protest happening in your area, go ahead and attend. If you can organize a protest with your friends in your school, go ahead and do it, right? There's so many different causes that you can get involved in that are doing the work right now. Just a simple Google search can allow you to channel that energy into actual change and to progressing the movements forward. So find avenues to engage, but in those moments where you can engage, if a politician is doing something and voting is 5 months from now, distract yourself with something else that you actually can do something about.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for your responses, such amazing responses in a time like this. So I kind of want to leave us with this scripture, because I think there's been questions surrounding what does the Bible say about social justice and what we should do to fight for Black lives, right? And so one of my favorite texts is Proverbs 31, 8-9. And it says, "Open your mouth for the mute, for the rights of all who are destitute. Open your mouth, judge righteously, defend the rights of the poor and the needy." And so that tells you right there that the Bible speaks about fighting for the oppressed people and that we should not stay silent on these issues. Once again, you guys, I want to thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. This was such an important conversation, and you as young people, it's good to know that you guys are being active in your own churches. That's why you've been recommended to sit on this panel for today. But I want to let you guys know this won't be the last time that we have this discussion. And so, yeah, thank you guys so much. Also, I attend Metropolitan SDA, and I'm a part of a group. It's called Flow. They are actually having a show today at 4:30, and they're going to discuss love and money. The channel is at Flow Presents, so if you are able to watch, please do go and support them. But thank you once again, and we have Latasha who will make our last announcement.
First of all, and I'm sure Pastor Graham will join me in this, we are so proud of this panel this afternoon. It was great to listen to the dialogue, and you all will be able to catch up with all the commentary in the chats from YouTube and Facebook. We appreciate that as well. The dialogue there is great. It really shows us that this is a conversation that we do need to have more of. And so we're going to create more platforms to do that. So we appreciate you guys, coming out of the gate and putting a nice standard in place as we go forward with more of these youth panels. So we just want to thank you for that. What do you think, Pastor Graham? We need to do more of these?
Yeah, I can't pay them, but they were listen. I listened to it, and it's better than what I thought it was going to be. You guys are brilliant. You guys are and the scope of all of you. It's one Richmond, and we down in New Jersey. I just thought it was just absolutely great. I learned a lot from it also, especially I learned a lot of what you're thinking, because there were many times that you were saying certain things and I was like, well, I don't think that way. Okay, it's not about what I think. It's about what you think. And I thought it was great. And I'm glad that Ms. Latasha is setting up more throughout month that's coming, because I think that it absolutely opens us up to have the dialogue that we need to have. Let's start now, so that as we go through the rest of the year, we know that you all have been the ones who broke the grounds to allow us to open up for other young people to hear what they have to say. I thought it was just absolutely awesome. Thank you a lot. Thank you. It was great.
Yeah, and we don't want to keep everyone long, but we do want to let you know that we have some other things coming up in the month of August. And I just want to give credit to Lauren and Jake. Lauren and Jake have been working with me this summer, and we talked about some of the things that we wanted to do to bring youth, the youth voice out. So this panel was their brainchild, but they also had some other ideas. One of them is to do a youth showcase, art showcase. And we're not just talking about singing, although singing is encouraged. I'm just going to put this up here so everyone can see. For the month of August, of course, today we had our panel discussion. Next week, we're going to have a youth showcase for ages 2 to 12. Following week, we're going to talk about what our youth are doing through this COVID struggle, because we all know it's real. And then we're going to have another showcase for ages 13 to 21, August the 29th. And so, Lauren, you want to tell people what we're looking for this showcase? What's the purpose of this showcase for our young people?
So this showcase is basically to uplift the youth, and like we've been doing with these panel discussions and tutoring people from around the conference, we just want to like kind of embrace the youth and the talents that we were all gifted with from God. So like for example, Jake and I back at our church, we play music and we lead a praise team, and those are some the kind of things that we want to share with the rest of the conference. So in the showcase, we'd have like arts, and you know how art is very broad, so it could be music. It could be paintings, drawings, literally anything you see on the screen here. But we just basically want to embrace this and like share it with others. And I think it's a good way to bring all the youth together as well, and allow us to make new friends around the conference.
Absolutely. Thank you. We realize even from this panel that we have a lot of gifted young people out there, and they don't always have a platform to show what they can do, especially now with us being in our homes mostly. So if you have a young person that wants to be showcased, please reach out to me, lhewitt@aecsda.com. We really want to highlight them. And we also have some things coming up from the youth department. We want to shout those out real quick. Pastor Graham, can you share what's going on tomorrow?
Well, for the Pathfinder organization, we have trees tomorrow at 6 o'clock. And that will be, our Pathfinder honors. It's going to be great. I'm going to be teaching. Nobody else is going to be teaching. I'll teach that, especially for the summer. So we'll have fun doing that. And then
That's 3 o'clock, right?
It's going to be at 3 o'clock. Yeah, and you can sign up on our website. You'll see it at aecycm.com. We also have guardrails for parents. That's coming every two Sundays, I should say, right? And that's going to be at 6 o'clock. You see the dates as there: August, September, October, November, December. How do we say it? Bi-weekly, right? That's when it's going to be.
That's it.
And this one coming up is we're going to be talking about technology and your children. So this is more for the parents, not really for the kids. We're more telling on the kids, on the young people. So
telling all their secrets, all the tricks of the trade.
Yeah, most of them. So we have quite a few things coming up. Wednesday night coming up, we also have a 30-minute prayer service for our young people. So we're going to try to keep everybody busy in this virtual thing. And if any one of you have ideas about what we can do, please just let us know. We'll be more than happy to go ahead and help with that. Our minds, we might have a little bit of wisdom, but you guys got the strength and the mind frame. So just let us know and we'll run with it.
All right, great. That's a little rundown of other things coming up. We just want once again to thank this awesome panel. You guys did a wonderful job. You made us so proud, and I know those who are watching are proud of you as well. Thank you so much. We appreciate your voices today. All right, everyone, we're going to sign off. We thank those who joined us viewing on Facebook and YouTube. Continue to stay connected to us so you can see all the other things we have coming up for our youth and others. So we're signing off. Let's give them a wave, everyone.